Ever heard of a disease named after a place?
Hmm.
We're not talking about something obvious like the London flu or the
Yeah.
Tokyo cough.
Yeah.
Think more along the lines of a deadly disease
Okay.
traced back to a hotel in Philadelphia
Hmm.
or a stomach bug that got its name from a small town in Ohio.
Interesting.
These are what we call eponymous diseases,
Okay.
illnesses whose names are forever intertwined with the locations of their first major outbreaks.
And what's fascinating is how these seemingly ordinary places, a hotel, a school, even a river,
Yeah,
became unlikely landmarks in the history of medicine.
exactly.
Yeah.
And today,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take you on a deep dive into 3 such cases:
Okay.
Legionnaire's disease,
Mm-hmm.
norovirus,
Yes.
and Ebola.
Wow.
We'll uncover how these illnesses were identified,
Okay.
the impact they had,
Mm-hmm.
and why their names became synonymous with the places where they first emerged.
It's a journey that will take us from the bustling streets of Philadelphia during the bicentennial celebrations
Right.
to a small town in Ohio bracing for Halloween,
Yeah.
and then all the way to the heart of Africa.
So buckle up
Okay.
and get ready for some surprising twists and turns as we unravel the stories behind these eponymous diseases.
Sounds good.
We'll start with Legionnaire's disease.
Okay.
Picture this.
Okay.
It's 1976.
Uh-huh.
The bicentennial summer in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
The city is alive with celebrations,
Right.
and the Bellevue Stratford Hotel is packed with attendees of the American Legion Convention.
What's interesting here is that amidst the patriotic fervor and excitement,
Yeah.
an invisible threat was lurking within the hotel itself.
Wow.
A bacteria that would soon make headlines around the world.
It's like something out of a medical thriller.
It is.
Days after the convention,
Yeah.
veterans start falling ill with mysterious symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
fever,
Right.
chills,
Mm-hmm.
muscle aches,
Yeah.
and a particularly nasty cough.
Oh, wow.
Some even experience mental confusion.
And tragically,
Right.
some of these veterans died
Oh, no.
initially from what doctors thought were heart attacks.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine the panic? This was just a year after the swine flu scare.
Oh, yeah.
So anxieties were already running high.
Yep.
People were understandably terrified.
Of course.
Theories ran rampant.
Yeah.
Was it food poisoning?
Uh-huh.
A new bioweapon?
It's scary.
The unknown was truly frightening.
I can imagine.
The CDC launched a full-scale investigation,
Mm-hmm.
the largest in their history at the time.
Wow.
They tested everything they could think of.
Okay.
Food,
Yeah.
water, air samples.
Wow.
But the culprit remained elusive for months.
So how did they finally figure out what it was?
What's fascinating is that it was a CDC microbiologist named Joseph McDade
Okay.
who finally cracked the case,
Mm-hmm.
and it happened almost by accident.
Really?
He was reviewing his work over the Christmas holidays
Wow.
and noticed something odd about the bacteria samples.
Wait, so he was working through the holidays trying to solve this mystery.
He was...
His dedication.
Yeah.
What did he find?
He realized that the bacteria they were looking for,
Uh-huh.
a previously unknown type called Legionella pneumophila,
Okay.
was incredibly sensitive to the very antibiotics they were using to prevent contamination in their cultures.
Wow.
It was basically dying off before they could even properly study it.
So they were essentially killing the culprit without realizing it.
Exactly.
Wow.
Once they adjusted their methods,
Mm-hmm.
they were able to isolate the bacteria
Like,
and confirm that it was indeed the cause of the mysterious illness.
so that was it.
And here's where the connection to the hotel comes in.
Yeah.
They discovered that the bacteria was thriving in the hotel's air conditioning system.
Ah, so that's how it spread.
Yes.
Makes sense now.
A combination of the summer heat wave
Uh-huh.
and an overworked air conditioning system
Right.
created the perfect conditions for the bacteria to multiply and spread through the hotel's ventilation system.
So it just traveled through the air.
It traveled through the air in tiny droplets of mist,
Oh, wow.
infecting people who inhaled it.
That's why even people who didn't spend much time inside the hotel,
Right.
like that bus driver who mainly stayed on his bus outside,
Mm-hmm.
still got sick.
Precisely.
Wow.
The mist carrying the bacteria could travel some distance from the cooling towers.
Interesting.
And because Legionella thrives in warm, moist environments,
Yeah.
it's not surprising that it found a perfect breeding ground in the hotel's air conditioning system.
But this discovery didn't just solve the Philadelphia outbreak.
Right?
It also led them back to a similar,
Yes.
though milder,
Mm-hmm.
outbreak that happened in Pontiac, Michigan back in 1968.
Yes.
Remember that one?
Yes, that outbreak,
Yeah.
which occurred at the Pontiac Health Department of all places,
Wow.
had baffled investigators for years.
Really?
They called it Pontiac fever
Uh-huh.
because it caused flu-like symptoms,
Okay.
but wasn't as severe as the illness seen in Philadelphia.
So 2 outbreaks, years apart, but ultimately linked to the same culprit,
Exactly.
Legionella pneumophila.
That's right.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And the legacy of the Legionnaires' outbreak.
Well, it led to major changes in public health regulations.
Okay.
Suddenly, people started paying much closer attention to the potential for disease lurking in seemingly harmless places like cooling towers, hot tubs,
Yeah.
and even decorative fountains.
That's scary.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what other potential threats might be hiding right under our noses.
Exactly.
So we'll get to that later.
Okay.
For now.
Oh,
Let's move on to our second eponymous disease,
sounds good.
norovirus,
Okay.
which takes us from a grand hotel to a humble elementary school.
Get ready for a story that's less about deadly outbreaks
Okay.
and more about the scientific challenges of tracking down a truly elusive virus.
I'm intrigued.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
Picture a small town in Ohio
Okay.
getting ready for Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
It's 1968. And at an elementary school in Norwalk,
Mm-hmm.
excitement is in the air.
I bet.
But instead of costumes and candy,
Oh, no.
an unwelcome guest arrives.
Really?
A sudden outbreak of severe gastrointestinal illness.
Oh, no, not exactly the kind of trick-or-treating anyone wants.
Hmm.
What were the symptoms?
We're talking classic stomach bug stuff.
Okay.
Vomiting,
Yes, yeah.
diarrhea.
Uh-huh.
The works. It ripped through the school,
Oh, God.
spreading to families and the community faster than you could say.
Bet.
Halloween was pretty much canceled that year.
So how did they approach this outbreak? Was it anything like the Legionnaires' investigation?
Well, the CDC jumped in, of course.
Yeah.
But this time, finding the source proved much trickier.
Really?
They investigated everything.
Like what?
Food,
Uh-huh.
water,
Oh.
you name it.
Yeah.
But no clear culprit emerged.
So how did they even know it was an infectious disease if they couldn't find the source?
That's where things get interesting.
Okay.
They conducted what's called an inoculum experiment,
Interesting.
essentially.
Huh?
They took samples from people who were sick
Okay.
in various outbreaks,
Yeah.
including the one in Norwalk, and
Right.
prepared let's just say a special concoction.
This is starting to sound a little bit like a mad scientist experiment.
Maybe a little.
Did it give them any answers?
It did.
Really?
A significant number of the volunteers who received the Norwalk concoction got sick with the same symptoms,
Wow.
confirming that they were dealing with an infectious agent.
Okay.
But identifying the actual culprit took years.
Really?
It wasn't until much later,
Uh-huh.
with advancements in technology like electron microscopy,
Right.
that they were finally able to visualize and identify the virus,
Oh, wow.
which they named the Norwalk virus,
Okay.
later renamed norovirus.
So they knew it was a virus all along,
Right.
but they just couldn't see it.
They couldn't.
That's wild.
It highlights the challenges of studying viruses,
Mm-hmm.
especially back then,
Yeah.
even today. Norovirus is a tricky one to research,
Interesting.
which is partly why we still don't have a vaccine for it.
Speaking of challenges,
Yeah,
I remember hearing that norovirus is notoriously contagious.
it is.
It seems like every other week there's a news story about an outbreak on a cruise ship or at a summer camp.
That's because norovirus is incredibly resilient.
Oh, wow.
It can survive on surfaces for weeks
Ah.
and resist many common disinfectants.
Oh, gosh.
It only takes a tiny amount to make someone sick,
Really?
and it spreads easily through contaminated food, water,
Right.
or even just touching a contaminated surface.
That explains why it's so hard to contain.
It is.
So what's the takeaway here? Besides being extra careful on cruise ships, of course.
I think the story of norovirus underscores the importance of basic hygiene practices.
Okay.
Washing hands thoroughly,
Right.
disinfecting surfaces,
Ugh.
and staying home when you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
These simple steps can make a big difference in preventing the spread of this and other nasty bugs.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most effective solutions are the simplest.
They are.
Well, we've covered a deadly bacteria lurking in a hotel
Right.
and a sneaky virus disrupting Halloween.
Yeah.
Now we're heading to the heart of Africa
Okay.
for our final eponymous disease,
Interesting.
Ebola.
Yes.
This one is often shrouded in fear and misunderstanding.
Yes. The name Ebola itself evokes a sense of dread.
Uh-huh.
But the story behind its discovery, the ongoing fight against it,
Mm-hmm.
is as much about human resilience and scientific collaboration as it is about the horrors of the disease.
I'm ready to learn more.
Okay.
Let's unravel the mystery of Ebola.
The story begins in 1976,
Okay.
a year that saw not one,
Uh-huh.
but two simultaneous outbreaks of a then unknown hemorrhagic fever.
Wow.
One erupted in Sudan,
Okay.
while the other struck Zaire,
Mm-hmm.
now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Right.
Initially, they thought these outbreaks were connected,
Ah.
but it turned out they were caused by different species of the Ebola virus.
Wow, 2 outbreaks at once.
Yeah.
In different parts of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been incredibly challenging to deal with.
It was.
Where do we even begin to understand this complex situation?
Let's start with the outbreak in Sudan.
Okay.
Imagine a bustling cotton factory in a town called Nazara.
Okay.
Workers there started falling ill
Oh, no.
with strange and frightening symptoms.
Like what?
Fever,
Uh-huh.
headache,
Okay.
muscle pain,
Hmm.
and eventually bleeding.
Oh, gosh.
The very first case was a storekeeper
Okay.
who sadly died on July 6th of that year.
Oh, wow.
Shortly after his brother,
Yeah.
who had cared for him,
Right.
also became ill,
Oh, no.
but thankfully recovered.
That's good.
It's heartbreaking to think about how this disease could tear through families and communities, especially those who selflessly cared for the sick.
Absolutely.
What makes the Nazara outbreak particularly interesting
Uh-huh.
is how social connections played a crucial role in the disease's rapid spread.
Interesting.
For instance,
Okay.
the third worker to fall ill had a very active social life,
Uh-oh.
lots of friends,
Yeah.
who also had lots of friends.
Oh, no. I can see where this is going. A chain reaction of infection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As people visited and cared for each other,
Yeah.
the virus spread like wildfire.
I bet.
It even jumped to other towns as people traveled,
Wow.
often before they even realized they were sick.
Scary.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
the outbreak in Nazara ended as people,
Yeah.
understandably terrified,
Yeah.
started avoiding contact with each other.
It's a grim reminder of how fear can sometimes be the most effective,
Right.
albeit harsh
Yeah.
form of containment.
Right.
But what about the outbreak in Zaire?
Okay.
How did that unfold?
The Zaire outbreak began at the Yambuku Mission Hospital.
And this one is particularly chilling because of the role that contaminated needles played in its spread.
Oh, wow.
At the time,
Yeah.
injections were very common practice for administering medications, even for things like vitamins.
So a routine medical procedure became a vector for a deadly disease.
That's terrifying.
It was a tragic situation.
I can imagine.
The hospital, like many in the region,
Yeah.
was severely under-resourced.
I see.
They had a limited supply of needles and syringes,
Right.
which were simply rinsed with sterile water between patients
Really.
and boiled at the end of the day.
But that wasn't enough to kill the virus.
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, wow.
These sterilization methods were completely inadequate for dealing with a virus as deadly as Ebola.
Okay.
As a result,
Yeah.
many patients contracted the disease through contaminated injections.
That's scary.
It's estimated that roughly a quarter of the Ebola patients at the hospital
Wow.
had no risk factors other than those injections.
That's just devastating. It really underscores the importance of proper infection control practices,
Right.
especially in healthcare settings.
Absolutely.
And it makes the sacrifices of the hospital staff who put themselves at risk even more poignant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
13 out of the 17 staff members at Yambuku Mission Hospital fell ill,
Oh, wow.
and 11 of them tragically died.
That's awful.
Their courage and dedication,
Yeah.
even in the face of such unimaginable danger,
Mm-hmm.
is truly inspiring.
Their story is a powerful reminder of the human cost of these outbreaks.
It is.
It's not just about numbers and statistics.
Right.
It's about real people
Yeah.
whose lives were forever changed.
And it's about the importance of learning from these tragedies to prevent future ones.
Right.
The Yambuku outbreak, in particular, highlighted the need for better infection control measures, especially in resource-limited settings.
Speaking of learning,
Yeah.
how did they even figure out it was a new virus? And where did the name Ebola come from? It sounds so ominous,
Yeah.
almost like something out of a science fiction movie.
Well, identifying the virus was a collaborative effort.
But-
Teams from the World Health Organization,
Uh-huh.
along with scientists from various countries,
Right.
worked tirelessly to isolate and study the virus.
So a truly global effort to tackle a global threat.
Exactly.
But what about the name?
Hmm.
Why Ebola?
The name actually has a fascinating backstory.
Okay.
It was chosen by a member of the International Commission investigating the outbreak,
Hmm.
a man named Carl Johnson.
Okay.
He specifically wanted to avoid further stigmatizing communities that were already dealing with the trauma of the outbreak.
That's incredibly thoughtful.
Yeah.
I can see how naming a disease after a town or region could lead to fear,
Right.
discrimination, and even economic hardship for the people living there.
Exactly.
Wow.
So Johnson suggested Ebola after a river that flowed near the Yambuku Mission Hospital in Zaire. It was a deliberate choice to focus on a geographical feature rather than a place directly associated with the disease.
It's a remarkable example of how careful language choices can help mitigate stigma and promote sensitivity during outbreaks.
Absolutely.
And it's a principle that continues to guide disease naming practices today.
It does.
Think about the recent renaming of monkeypox to mpox.
Yes.
That change was driven by the same desire to avoid unnecessary stigma and discrimination.
Right.
It's a reminder that language matters,
Yeah.
especially when we're dealing with public health crises.
It does.
But the Ebola story doesn't end there, does it?
No, sadly it doesn't.
Oh, no.
The outbreaks of 1976 were just the beginning.
Hey.
Subsequent outbreaks,
Huh.
including the devastating West African epidemic of 2014-2016,
Yeah.
have served as stark reminders that Ebola remains a serious threat
Wow.
and that the fight against this deadly disease is far from over.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
But before we delve into the lessons learned
Okay.
and the ongoing challenges, let's take a step back
Uh-huh.
and consider what these three seemingly disparate stories have in common.
Okay.
We've journeyed from a hotel in Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
to a school in Ohio
Right.
and now to the heart of Africa.
Yeah.
What threads connect these events
Mm-hmm.
beyond the fact that they gave rise to equinymous diseases?
One thing that stands out is how these outbreaks reveal the interconnectedness of human health, cultural practices,
Yeah.
and scientific progress.
Interesting.
We see how seemingly ordinary events, a convention,
Right.
a Halloween celebration,
Yeah.
a routine medical procedure can become catalysts for major discoveries
Mm-hmm.
and shifts in our understanding of disease.
It's like those moments in history
Yeah,
where everything changes in an instant.
right.
But in this case,
Uh-huh.
it's not a war or a political upheaval.
Well,
It's something microscopic, a bacteria,
Mm.
a virus that has the
Mhm.
power to disrupt our lives and reshape our world.
exactly.
We also see how cultural norms
Right.
can both hinder and help in containing outbreaks.
Yeah.
In the case of Ebola, for example, traditional burial practices,
Right.
while rooted in love and respect, unfortunately, facilitated the transmission of the virus.
It highlights the complex interplay between science and culture
Yeah.
and the need for sensitivity and understanding when navigating these challenges.
Absolutely.
And of course, we see the tireless efforts of scientists and healthcare workers who, often at great personal risk,
Yeah.
work to understand and combat these threats.
Their dedication and bravery are truly remarkable.
Yeah,
They're the unsung heroes of public health.
absolutely.
And these outbreaks also forced us to confront the limitations of our knowledge
Right.
and to adapt our approaches. In the case of Legionnaires, it was recognizing the flaws in existing laboratory techniques
Right.
with norovirus.
Yeah,
It was the struggle to identify and study a virus that proved incredibly elusive.
it was.
And with Ebola, it was grappling with the ethical and logistical complexities of containing a highly contagious and deadly disease in resource-limited settings.
It was.
Each outbreak presented unique challenges,
Yeah.
forcing scientists,
Mm-hmm.
healthcare workers,
Right.
and policymakers to innovate and adapt.
It's a testament to human ingenuity and resilience, our ability to learn and evolve in the face of adversity.
It's inspiring,
Yeah,
but also a bit daunting,
true.
knowing that we'll always face new challenges,
Yeah.
new threats.
But it also underscores the importance of continued vigilance and investment in public health infrastructure,
Right?
research, and education.
Mm-hmm.
We can't afford to become complacent.
Well said.
Yeah.
The lessons we've learned from Legionnaires, norovirus, and Ebola must inform our approach to future outbreaks,
They must.
wherever and whenever they may occur.
So as we conclude our deep dive into these eponymous diseases,
Right.
what are your final thoughts? What
Hmm.
can our listeners take away from these stories?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're all part of a delicate global ecosystem.
Right.
What affects one community
Yeah.
can quickly ripple out to affect us all.
It can.
Our ability to respond effectively to these threats depends on a combination of scientific knowledge,
Yes.
cultural sensitivity,
Yeah.
and global cooperation.
Absolutely.
And perhaps most importantly,
Yeah.
it depends on our willingness to learn from the past,
It does.
to better prepare for the future.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent.
No.
We have to stay informed,
Right.
stay curious,
Yeah.
and be prepared to adapt to whatever challenges come our way.
And remember,
Yeah.
knowledge is most powerful when it's shared.
Right.
Talking about these issues,
Mm-hmm.
sharing what we've learned.
Yeah,
That's how we raise awareness and build a more resilient future.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell a friend about this episode.
Right.
Share it on social media.
Uh-huh.
You never know. It might spark a conversation that leads to a new discovery or a fresh perspective on these important issues.
It might.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the bustling streets of Philadelphia
Yeah.
to a small town in Ohio bracing for Halloween
Yeah.
and all the way to the heart of Africa.
It's been a journey.
But one thing is clear.
What's that?
Eponymous diseases,
Mm-hmm.
with their intriguing names and compelling backstories,
Yeah.
offer a unique window into the complex interplay between human health,
Right.
cultural practices,
Yeah.
and scientific progress.
They remind us that seemingly ordinary events can have extraordinary consequences,
Right.
and that the fight against infectious diseases is an ongoing global effort that requires collaboration, innovation,
Yeah.
and a deep respect for the communities most affected.
So the next time you hear a disease named after a place,
Okay.
don't just think of it as a label.
Right.
Think of it as an invitation to delve deeper,
Yeah.
to understand the story behind the name, and to appreciate the intricate web of factors that shape our health and well-being.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of eponymous diseases.
Of
We hope you learned something new.
I hope so.
Maybe even gained a deeper appreciation for the complexities of public health,
Right.
and maybe even felt a little bit of that aha moment magic.
Until next time,
Yes.
stay curious,
Uh-huh.
stay informed,
Mm-hmm.
and stay healthy.
And keep feeding that good wolf.
Great advice.